Welcome everybody to the March edition of Parkside Chats. We've been doing this series now for 9 months, almost a year now, and we've been really fortunate during this time to have access to friends across the country. This has really opened up new doors for us for ways to collaborate with friends, experts, and partners throughout parks across the country. So we're super excited to continue this series. This particular topic tonight on programming public spaces is really relevant for us right now as we look to what we're doing in Balboa Park as museums open up and the park is getting ever more populous day after day. For this conversation, I'll just introduce myself to those of you who don't know me. I'm Sarah Beckman. I'm the Director of External Relations for the Balboa Park Conservancy. And today I'm joined by my colleague, Christina Brell, who's hosting us on the tech side, monitoring chat, troubleshooting anyone who needs extra assistance or has questions for the end. I'm also joined by my colleague, Jackie Higgins. And Jackie, I'll allow you to introduce yourself. We've also got Michael Warburton, who's our Balboa Park friend from the Balboa Park Cultural Partnership, and then our special guest, David Cowan from Downtown Detroit Partnership. These are really experts in their field, and it's all different lenses and perspectives on placemaking in public spaces. So I think this will be a really engaging conversation. I'll just have you each do a little introduction for yourself, and I'd like to start with David. Welcome.
Well, first, thank you, Sarah, for the very kind invite, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm a big fan of San Diego. I'm a big fan of Balboa Park, and I'm David Cowan, Director of Public Spaces and Programming for the Downtown Detroit Partnership. And our organization is a nonprofit public-private partnership that manages a network of 6 public spaces in downtown Detroit, about 500,000 square feet of space. And we program about 1,900 events a year. So we're very heavily programmed. We also make sure to maintain space for passive programming and daily park use as well. So just excited to be here, and thanks again for the invite.
Let's hear from Mike.
Hey there. Also, thank you for the invite. And David, big fan of the work happening in Detroit. I'm the Director of Parkwide Communications at the Cultural Partnership in Balboa Park. And we're a membership organization. A majority of the nonprofits in the park are members of the Cultural Partnership. And we really work to create collaborative opportunities, find ways to support the organizations parkwide. And also we manage the Explorer Pass program, which is a one pass to multiple museums in the park. And my role specifically, though, is really looking at Balboa Park as a destination and how to position it as a destination and a great place to visit.
Jackie.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jacqueline Higgins. I'm the Director of Planning, Design, and Programs here with the Balboa Park Conservancy. And for those of you that don't know me, my background is in landscape architecture. So when I first, started working with what we call in placemaking is really from the design perspective. And, back in my studies, we looked at a lot of human behavior and motivation and how people enter spaces and how they function in spaces. So that's my lens that I'm going to be looking at things today.
Great. Thanks, Jackie. Before we kick it off, I do want to thank everyone that's invited to this event and attending tonight. These wouldn't be possible without all of the Conservancy donors and all of our partners. We really have tried to make an effort to keep communicating with you all and offer ways to be engaged and kind of get an insider's view of the park. So thank you again for being here today. And I'd like to kick this off with a question that each of you, I hope, will answer in your own way. What does placemaking mean to you in your role in the park? For this one, let's start with Mike.
Yeah, thanks. When I think of placemaking, and I also think about the lens that I use all the time, which is Balboa Park as a destination, I really think of placemaking as that full experience when visiting the park, right? So it's as much as it is visiting the museums and the cultural venues as it is walking a path or having a great experience at a restaurant in the park. Those those moments that may be between the museums, let's say, during a visit, can really honestly make or break a visit to the park. If you have a terrible experience in a plaza, then really that kind of ruins your whole day, regardless of the rest of your day. So these experiences are vitally important, but also too, it happens whether we intend it to happen or not. Placemaking. An example is right now we have a lot of things still going on with vendors or buskers or people that are still creating these discoverable moments in the park. So it's still happening. But yeah, I really feel like that placemaking as a concept helps to really fulfill that full park experience.
Thanks, Mike. Let's hear from David.
So I'm a lifelong Detroiter, and you know, I've always loved the city of Detroit. And for me, placemaking and public space management in the city is very personal because it has profound impacts on the place that I grew up and the place where I live today. So to best illustrate our approach to placemaking at the Downtown Detroit Partnership, I thought I would give your audience some brief background on our work here at the Downtown Detroit Partnership, and you know, just give you a chance to see the incredible momentum in placemaking in the city of Detroit throughout the last 10 years. It has quite literally been the way that we've been able to shift the narrative around Detroit as a place of decline and urban decay. And so I'll just share a few visuals here if I can do that, since I'm a visual person, and I know that everybody loves a good before and after. Oh, disabled. So I'm guessing it likely would not shock anybody listening in that headlines like this on the screen often dominated the conversation about Detroit. And you know, maybe they still do among those that haven't visited us in a while. And because of that, it was really, really difficult for us to attract investment and to get people to see and buy into this vision. And so even with the rich architecture, the history, the culture, the art scene, you know, you name it, it sounded like an insurmountable task. And for us to begin attracting investment, it was very important that people could see the vision with their own eyes and not just be told about it. We had to essentially rebrand downtown Detroit through placemaking, redefine it with the city and the community as a space where people wanted to spend time and feel comfortable. And that's, you know, day in and day out, at nighttime, all seasons, year round. And so we went from a downtown that, you know, looked like this 10 years ago. And this is probably the imagery you're used to seeing about Detroit. This was downtown Detroit 10 years ago. It was lacking in vibrancy and street life. It was filled with empty parking lots. And it just didn't have the type of energy that a downtown core typically would have. And so, you know, fast forward to today, downtown Detroit is really a vibrant place. It is safe, it's welcoming, it's inclusive, it's heavily programmed. And it's really important for us to be able to show that before and after story and picture to people, because unless you visited Detroit, you can't really grasp at it, because the narrative around the city has been so one-dimensional for so long that it's been incredible to be given the opportunity to work in this type of industry, in this field. You know, for me, placemaking is what really fuels public life. It's the energy behind coordinated gatherings. It is really about, you know, community. It's about culture. It's about coming together. And so I love the question, what is placemaking? Because it tends to be one of those abstract words that people like see a picture in their mind, but they can't really put words to it. And so, you know, it's basically the practice by which spaces are collaboratively designed, created, managed, and branded. And so, you know, the last thing I'll say is that placemaking is not always celebrated in some communities, especially when private development tends to take this practice and kind of rapid fire replicate it across the spectrum. And so, you know, we often see what we call place taking, and my other favorite, place faking. And so, you know, where that authenticity isn't really there, and it's not a unique space, and it's kind of like the chain restaurant of placemaking. And so, you know, it's also a tool. It's a tool that should be used responsibly.
Thanks, David. I think that's right on. Especially what resonates with me is the authenticity of place. That's where you're making the connection, and especially when it's community driven in that way. Jackie, do you want to share with us what it means to you?
Sure. I love that analogy of the chain restaurant of placemaking. I'm totally going to use that, David. Placemaking to me, you know, I always lean back to, you know, my training and where I come from. And placemaking to me is really, it starts with having an environment where people want to be. And for me, that's like looking at human scale and human comfort and human behavior on, you know, what is inviting, you know, sitting in the middle of a paved area that's hot in the sun, obviously, you know, is not going to be as inviting as sitting under the shade of a beautiful tree, you know. So that is the first layer that I look at when I think about placemaking, is the actual physical design, and then the opportunities, you know. It's not just the design, but, you know, the activities that are happening. So that adds another level of comfort and familiarity and stuff like that. So, and obviously being accessible, as David mentioned, you have to be able to safely get there. And that's another element of human comfort and human scale and stuff. So that's what I think of when I think of placemaking. You know, it's got to be something that people want to be in and be involved in and feel comfortable with.
Yeah, your last comment right there is exactly what resonates in my head constantly, is really thinking about, like, it can be a very personal thing for people, right? It can be something as simple as a place to sit and have a moment. Or it can be enjoying the latest food truck and hearing a cool band. But, you know, it really comes down to that visitor experience and the individual visitor's viewpoint on you know, what it is they want to have. That's what I love about, you know, the collaboration that we've been building on these things in the park, is really kind of riffing off of what David was doing. It's like, oh my gosh, you know, some of those images looked like renderings. Like they were so beautiful. And it's like, yeah, I feel like we can also take a lot of what they're doing and apply it here. So it's exciting.
I just to jump in, I think I often think about what makes a park comfortable to someone. And that's such a loaded, deep question that you really can't, you know, gloss over. I mean, if you've ever, you know, bought a house, or you've like looked on Zillow, you quickly realize that people have like crazy different tastes across the board. I mean, it just, and to be a public space and to be stuck in this kind of thought process or challenge around, does this park need to be all things to all people, or does it, you know, is it too narrow? You know, those are kind of the balancing act that we go through every day in a lot of nuance as place managers and as people who are in this kind of placemaking, you know, field. Place making as a field is also like relatively new. I don't think anybody's like gone to school for placemaking, or maybe they have. I don't know. There might be new programs out there, but usually it's the people who are the best placemakers are generalists, in the sense that they can take a lot of different knowledge in industry and synthesize it into a plan, into a vision. They take their urban planning, they take their arts background, they take their experience in hospitality or food and beverage, and they kind of create this role for themselves that is, you know, literally making the place. It's tricky. It requires a lot of work. I think a lot of people envision placemaking as a, you know, they think about it and they're like, okay, it's a game of cornhole, or it's like a roll of like green turf thrown in a parking spot somewhere. But it really is about, you know, Jackie said this about design. Like, you know, people go to spaces they feel comfortable in, and spaces they feel comfortable in are often designed, to inform the behavior in the space and how they interact with the things in it. So it's a really finite type of thing, and it has everything to do with comfort, shade, safety, programming, food and beverage. I mean, think about the 10 things that you want when you go somewhere. Like, do you have those things? If not, can you add them, and then can you pay for them? So it's this really incredibly interesting but challenging field. So anybody who's thinking about getting more involved, definitely encourage you to do so.
I think what's most clear is that this is a really rich and complicated process that we're involved in, and that it's layers of experience. I think especially, so I noticed in the chat that Christopher mentioned that, looking at this from a community versus a destination. And I think this is at the crux of almost all of our conversations around placemaking, and why I have the participants here today that I do, is that Balboa Park is a neighborhood park. It's a local park. It's an urban city park and a resource for the county as a whole. And I think that when we're thinking about placemaking, to have it be community driven, and Mike and I have conversations about this all the time, that if you are creating experiences that your community is thriving in and drawn to, whether it's more passive or something more, blown up like a food truck event, naturally you will attract tourists and the kind of necessary visitation that drives our economy. And that's, Balboa Park is an economic driver, and we can't forget that. But we're here to serve the community, and so I think they can coexist. And I'm interested to hear, Mike, your perspective on how an experience for a tourist and sort of attracting folks to come to the park plays into this story.
Yeah, the conversations we have, I really enjoy. And, even some of the more recent conversations as we are looking at an experience planning process around the cultural core, putting my marketing hat on, we want to do some things that are really probably considered market research. But to Christopher's point in the chat, who isn't coming to the park? I think that's a question that we don't ask often enough, potentially. And why aren't they coming to the park? And as locals, if locals are experiencing the park in a way that they enjoy, that they feel comfortable in, heck yeah, tourists will love it too. And this is one of those things where tourism is more and more becoming like touring like a local, right? And there's actually a new crop of folks who are doing long-term tourism, which is, instead of like going on vacation for a week, because they can work from anywhere, they'll stay in a destination for a month and really start to behave like a local and experience things like a local. So that's just a whole nother way of thinking about this. But overall, tourists, Balboa Park is always a top visitation location. That's even when you consider the beaches and so forth. And in that list is always the San Diego Zoo, which is also in the park. Tourists are going to come because they know they should. They've heard about this Balboa Park place. They don't necessarily know what that expectation is. So from a tourism perspective, I think it's on us to also leverage placemaking as well as the great venues to set expectations more clearly for tourists, while at the same time creating experiences in the park that really serve the local population.
And I think, David's mentioning that in Detroit, it's heavily programmed. And I know certain, heavily programmed versus that passive and active placemaking, you have to look at what you're trying to do for your space. And certainly I wouldn't guess that anyone here is advocating to like activate all of Balboa Park, but there are certain areas where it's really appropriate for that. And there's really a lot of opportunities to kind of enhance the neighborhood experience and, any kind of out of town visitor experience in those spaces. David, do you have a mix of locals and tourists in your space? How do you manage that?
Yes. And Sarah, I totally agree with you that it is all about what are you trying to accomplish and what are your goals, and and what are you trying to create? Because for us, you know, you have to remember the background and the context, which is why I kind of spent a little bit of time going through that at the front end, because Detroit, our goal was to activate and bring some life to the city, you know, and to really drive that. So for us, our strategy to get there was through programming, was through events, giving people a reason to come to these parks and giving them an experience there. As our parks and as downtown has developed, we've not needed to do that as much anymore, because we've now attracted through placemaking like close to $1 billion worth of investment right at the park in the center of town. So we've got daytime workforce, we've got residential downtown, we've got tourists, but not only just tourists, we've got like regional day trippers, we've got like statewide people, we've got national people, international people that come here for like Motown and for autos and all the other kind of stuff we're known for. So it's a balance, but it's also a both and, I guess, because the true nature of public spaces are, you know, they're open. You know, like we don't have gates on our parks. Like people can just come and go. There's like 10 different entrances. It's free. We want different people to come. We want intergenerational. We want all races, backgrounds to interact with each other, neighbors to meet up. You know, so I would say it is a balance. And when's the right time to program something? What are you trying to do? Maybe your angle is you want to bring more development or attract more investment. Okay, that's a whole economic driving lens to put on it. Or you want to instill more civic pride, you know, in the city. And so that's a whole other layer or lens. Or you want to, you know, create a long-term sustainability plan for the park and really, you know, ramp up the capital improvements. And so there's a million different ways you can approach this. And I think you're right on with the way you're thinking about it for Balboa Park, which is, you know, yes, it's also a place for those people. And Mike, you said it, who am I missing? So I think everybody that's a place manager has a responsibility to go and look for people that aren't there and why aren't they there? Yeah. If you know, and I'll just make this kind of last comment, but if you know Detroit is right next to Dearborn, Michigan, and Dearborn is an amazing place. It's got wonderful culture, tons of Muslim, Islamic friends and neighbors. And so, you know, when we were building Beacon Park on the western side of downtown, we were setting up for an event, and we had our kind of this bar area that was set up, getting ready for something that night. And we were kind of wondering, you know, we had some folks come to the park and we're like, what are they doing behind the bar? And so it was because there was no private place for call to prayer. And so we were thinking that that was a moment of placemaking for us where we were like, wow, we did not consider this at all in what we're doing. And so the deeper you can go and the more people you can talk to and interact with, the better and the more inclusive the places will be. And I think that's something everybody in the country is trying to figure out is what benchmarks should I be setting for visitorship in my parks? And so I don't think we figured it out yet, but we're on that journey and having a lot of conversations to help inform our work in the future.
David, yeah, that's definitely our responsibility in these roles, is to drive those conversations, allow them to happen, and be responsible for seeking them and seeking that input. Moving forward to like, what have we done over the past year? I know Balboa Park really has been kind of in a unique aspect compared to other parts of the country. I've talked to friends in South Carolina and in Canada and New York, and each area is treating this really differently. David, you guys were at the cutting edge of creating safe experiences early on. And I remember asking you, even for your booklet that you guys developed on having those events. How has that worked out for you?
Thankfully, well. We definitely, you know, it's been over a year. It's crazy to believe time moves so weirdly, but yeah, Sarah, you and I were chatting, and I sent you our kind of COVID-19 playbook, like, because we all got together and we're like, okay, everything is shutting down, everything's being canceled, and we were kind of, you know, learning what this virus meant to us and to our families and to our community. So every day we learned a little bit more, and then we got to maybe like May, when we would normally approach the start of our programming season, and we looked around and we said, okay, a lot of people are using the parks and public spaces, like because the primary message was don't gather. Once, and if you know about Michigan, we were early in our shutdown, so we curbed it pretty quick, and so then we reopened earlier than some others, so we had people back outside, and the parks didn't close. We stopped programming and had to do some other things, but we re-engaged in June, and we did so with really detailed protocols. It was important to us that we didn't just throw in the towel, and we kept these places for use. At the same time, we were really careful not to be negligent. Like, we did not want to be a super spreader. We didn't want to be a spreader of any kind. So we were very careful, very limited. We designed it. We just put some design thinking on how we were going to re-engage, and we did it slowly. We looked at what worked, what didn't work, and it evolved. In the beginning, we didn't require masks because at that point, the thought was people were outside. We're talking like March of last year, and so very quickly we realized, like, okay, masks are one of the key things. Like, we have to, even outside, because our parks are big, but they're not huge. They're not like Balboa Park, where you can, like, be on the other end and be way distanced. You can't consistently distance. So we pretty quickly had to get organized and put our plan together, and it worked out well. It worked out well, I would have to say. We are still limited in capacity. So we had 100 people max last year outside. This year we're 300. So we can start to re-engage in a safe way.
Yeah. Jackie, we've been having conversations about how we might proceed in Balboa Park, knowing that we were on a much more restrictive track than Detroit at this point. But do you want to speak a little bit about what you see coming in the next 3, 6, 12 months?
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on the progression that we're seeing here. Obviously is quite different than what David was describing. We just, as of last week, got into the red tier, which is, second best to totally locked down. So we have a much slower progression of opening up and people being comfortable being out in public spaces. And I think that, when we look at what's happening in Balboa Park, placemaking is really different. Like, now Balboa Park is a place that people are coming to get vaccinated. Like, this is the outdoor spaces are here, and they've been open again since June. And like David mentioned, it is a big park. So we are very blessed and fortunate that people can really distance. Michael and Sarah and I worked on the signage back in May, when we started to reopen for June, on yes, masks. What are the primary messaging that we were getting from the county and from the state, making sure that we're communicating with people. People know what the right protocol is, so that people feel safe and welcome in our outdoor public spaces. So it's nice when you talk about placemaking. It's like, what does the community need? The community needs to feel safe and welcome. And, we're so fortunate to have Balboa Park with such diverse places. We have, big open spaces, we have canyons, we have big plazas and stuff like that. And that caters to so many different personalities and the different needs of people. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of organic placemaking happening right now in Balboa Park. We were talking earlier today about the roller skaters and the newly paved South Palisades. That's something that potentially wasn't allowed before, but no one's really putting the kibosh on it, because it's exciting to see new things and new activities. And now the conversation is, how can we facilitate this to make it safe, so that it doesn't interfere with other things that might happen in that space once we continue to open up in this safe progression. So yeah, to see the park as the place people come to get vaccinated, the place people come for respite and the place people come to also re-engage with their community. It's good to see in Balboa Park.
I was talking, was it Alan Spector this morning shared with us that he's never seen so many picnickers on the West Mesa. It's like record number of picnickers, which I think we all love that there's sort of this romance of use of the park for open space and for respite, like you were talking about, Jackie. And I do think moving forward, parks play a really critical role in this transition socially from being quarantined and isolated as individuals or as family units into kind of back into our larger like normal social engagements. And so I think there's an opportunity for us in how we approach placemaking to make that transition feel easier and safer and welcoming. And picnicking is a passive way of doing it for individuals, but I think we can take a nod from that in itself is place activation. It's not necessarily programming, with a band and a dance floor and a food truck. That's not really required. I'd love to hear from each of you on kind of what you think your take is moving forward for ways that parks, and maybe Balboa Park in particular, could sort of ease that transition and again kind of move away from large scale food truck events to things that are more spontaneous and small and creative and kind of testing some of the opportunities out there to see what ideas stick. It's definitely a time for creativity. Let's hear from Mike.
Well, I'll start with saying that, I think measuring is going to be important. Measuring public sentiment, measuring where we're at in our COVID situation, and hearing from the county and the state on gathering restrictions, how many is too many, and all of these things. They will, data will play a factor in making some of these decisions. And there's a lot of information available too from a tourism perspective, a lot of different outlets. But overall, I do see where passive placemaking will continue to play a huge role as people slowly ease their way back. It's something that is comfortable, right? So safe places to sit and maybe eat. The comment about the picnicking is perfect, right? Like, how can we encourage that kind of activity? But then also finding ways to engage people in activities and things that they want to do with their family or with whoever they're visiting the park with that still allow them to feel fulfilled in their visit, but safely. So that could be anything from tours. The visitor center, for example, you operate tours. So maybe it's, modifying your tours to smaller capacities, or, finding ways to give people that fulfilling experience during their visit. And there are a lot of opportunities around that, especially at the venue level or the institutional level. We're not even getting into the indoors piece, which just reopened or is in process of reopening.
Right. And Mike, I think that there's an opportunity to be creative about, and we've been talking about this, especially at our meeting this afternoon, is in what ways can you enhance that passive experience with something that's maybe from one of the cultural organizations or another resource, and link, what's happening on the West Mesa from a picnicking perspective to what's happening inside the walls of the San Diego Museum of Art. I mean, those are like what can be light and spontaneous and not this, not having to over program or over plan some kind of event. But there are some unique opportunities because there are so many users of the park right now and kind of these passive experiences happening.
Yeah, I want to answer also. Ron asked really for a definition of the passive piece. And in my mind, that is creating an environment or a place where people feel comfortable to just be, to hang out. It means that there's probably not a musician there somebody who's creating an activity, but where like a good example is the living room area at Plaza de Panama, where you have the tables and chairs, and sometimes there's the grass area where people can hang out and outdoor games. That's more passive. People discover it and they're using it in their own way, but it's not programmed directly.
Yeah, thank you for that. David or Jackie, do you want to chime in?
Sure, only because Jackie and I were talking about this the other day, but the parks, the parks, are not just a place with a bench and some trees. There's so much more than that in this context. They're certainly public spaces that are open to everybody, but they're also, we've got restaurants in our public spaces. We have food trucks. We have an ice rink. We've got public art programs. We have, there's so many different things. And our parks are designed kind of to be like a theater set, with multiple transitions, sometimes even daily, weekly, monthly, seasonally. And so for us, our parks are all urban pocket parks, and we have a constellation of them across the downtown. I mean, our biggest park is probably like 125,000 square feet. So, I mean, think about that in context of Balboa Park. We're in a 1 square mile district in downtown. And something also that's unique is that all of our 4 major sports teams are within our 1 square mile district. So we've got 3, like stadiums, we've got theater, Broadway, and kind of similarly to Balboa Park, you've got this like wonderful, museum cultural district there. What great partners you have right in the park, and how to leverage them and not only support them, but be a space where that can spill out. And it's just an incredibly unique piece to Balboa Park that I love. And something we've been thinking about a lot, and again, we're looking in the crystal ball and reading tea leaves, and nobody really knows, but I think people will need 2 things coming out of the pandemic. They're going to need time, and they're going to need space, and they're going to need to be able to use the park in a kind of passive way. And again, like, is that public art? Is that a self-guided tour? People are going to need to ease back into it. But I do think sometime, and I don't know if that, is regional, probably is, based on, Jackie, your point, like where are people at in containing this thing, and in terms of vaccinations and all that. But for us, I think there's going to need to be a moment of a collective deep breath and a healing moment for the community that hasn't seen each other in any kind of real way, except virtually. Which I think we're all, kind of getting there with, but yeah, no, they're gonna need to come together in a space and kind of enjoy each other's company again. And so I don't know if that's a headline concert with 10, 15, 20,000 people. I don't think so, not right away, but it's gonna get there, and people are gonna, I think, there's gonna be a pent up demand for those kind of experiences when we get there. I just don't know when we're gonna get there.
I think that brings up a good point about managing as we move into this opportunity, when more and more folks are coming back to the park, setting expectations for the visitor experience. What do we need to consider for that? And Jackie and Mike, I think hearing from you 2 on this would be really interesting.
Yeah, I think, we always talk about population growth and what we're expecting here in San Diego. And, Balboa Park is the central park of San Diego, right? And so I think we're blessed because our forefathers thought ahead, our foremothers thought ahead, and we have this, 1,200 acres. And I think what we're going to see is more, what we talk about, like tourism and local tourism and exploration. I think we are gifted with this park, and there's so much to explore. I think in the past, we may have looked at areas where people can gather together and have these big events, but it doesn't have to be that way. And we could, encourage tours into the canyons, tours into the hidden gardens that we haven't always publicized as much as maybe we could. And these are, areas where people don't have to be in large crowds, but they're still exploring the park. They're still enjoying small company, whether it's, you know, people in their family or friends and stuff in smaller groups. And, you know, as you guys mentioned, the picnicking, you know, there's these simple pleasures that I think was one of the best lessons we've learned about this COVID situation, you know, the simple pleasures of life and what we have locally and the treasures that we have locally. So as we move forward, I'd like to be able to, you know, work with all the people we're working with in the institutions and other organizations in the park to really expand how we use the park. And I think with that, we're going to be able to have the opportunity to highlight places in the East Mesa that before people never really even thought of, but now it's a place of being safe outdoors and exploring, you know, so we have a lot of opportunities ahead of us.
Yeah, we do. Mike, what's your take on this?
Setting expectations,
Yeah.
No pressure. You know, I mean, really, expectations are set from communications ultimately. If you're communicating to a particular audience about something that they're interested in and they have expectations, we then have to deliver on or meet those expectations. And then the exponential challenge that we have is, of course, all the different uses for the park and the different people who use them. So it really comes down to just really authentically and intelligently targeting people for the uses that they may intend or be interested in, and setting expectations for them and meeting them and beating those expectations, because then it grabs hold and they tell their friends, and you know, so that expectation grows. But it's a challenge, you know. I mean, Sarah and I both, as communications folks, you know, there's a lot of expectation to try to describe in this park. So yeah, thanks. That keeps me awake.
Yeah, it does. So there's a number of questions, and we'll I might just direct them to a certain individual. So first one I think is really for David, about a little more about Downtown Detroit Partnership, you know, how it's funded, you know, how what your board is like, et cetera.
Sure. Yeah. So the Downtown Detroit Partnership is actually like a we have our 100th anniversary next year, so it's not a new entity. It's evolved a lot over time, you know, but it's not a new thing. We have about 50 full-time folks here at DDP. We've got a board that's made up of lots of different types of people. We've got about 62 board members, so pretty big board, lots of bosses, but really good, because you know we've got great need, and you know we're trying to accomplish a lot, and we're super ambitious, and we need the help of our board to be able to do that, and we certainly you know, I'm one of those people that really enjoys the fundraising process, and I'm never shy to, you know, to passionately pitch for a project or tell people why it matters and what it could do for different people. So you know, I think for us it's about how do we, you know, maybe expand our mission beyond our geography a bit, and start to tie things together more in a holistic citywide way, in which we're really you know, we're positioning ourselves as Detroit's downtown, but we're, again, you know, we're also more than that. We're a regional destination, we're a national destination, and so all those things are important. We're an entertainment district. So the way we're funded is we have sponsorships from corporations. We have earned revenue through food trucks, commissions on restaurant sales, liquor sales, public art commissions and royalties. I mean, we've gotten creative, you know what I mean? We every day we're like, okay, what's a new revenue stream we can try to find here? And of course, grants, philanthropies, city, federal dollars when we can tap into that. DDP is not a city agency. We're a nonprofit public-private partnership. And what's unique about us is that we kind of have taken on the role of, you know, stewarding this network of parks downtown pretty turnkey. So we fundraise it all privately. We've put in hundreds of millions of dollars into these parks over time. We manage them, program them, and we've got this long-term agreement with the city that supports that. And the city's got a lot of other nonprofit partners throughout the city. There's 128, I think, nonprofit partners, but there's also 128 square miles in the city. So it's a really big city when you think about it. Mm-hmm. So that's a huge task for the city to do on their own. So we kind of are the we've just kind of taken it upon ourselves to take public spaces on as part of our core mission.
That sounds great. And that is, you guys are definitely evolved and are operating as a model of that for many conservancies and private partners throughout the country. So we definitely look to you for advice on that.
Yeah, well, and I would say we've even gotten creative again, where corporations are, they've got their headquarters, right, and they feel like they want to do something for their employees, or maybe their headquarters is off on a different part of town, and they want to make their campus better. And so we've gotten into this kind of like side hustle of doing parks and placemaking for different companies, but they don't want to run them just for the employees. They want to make them open to the public and have them be a part of this network, so it's authentic and natural, and doesn't look like it's just a place for X company to go to. So we've kind of gotten into this, like, they're privately owned parks, but we operate them no differently than we would operate our public space. And so that's been kind of a rewarding new way that we've grown over time.
David, that is brilliant. Just like love that. Jackie, will you speak to Nancy Carroll Carter's question about open space versus placemaking and activation, kind of the sacred balance between the two, especially for Balboa Park?
Yes, is that buried in the chat? Could you, I'm not seeing it.
I'll put it in a link to you. It's in the Q&A. Let's see.
Sorry about that.
I'll just say it. So Nancy indicates placemaking and activation of Balboa Park are discussions that we've had recently and currently. And does this emphasis give enough attention to passive uses of the park, quiet areas, and the retention of open space?
Yeah, I mean, placemaking is both of that. It's the passive places, the West Mesa, where you just have expansive open lawns and shade trees, and maybe the occasional bench and a walkway, or a group of planting of trees. We've got our magnolia grove, we've got our cypress grove. Those are made, those are designed, right? Those are passive areas. People can go and sunbathe on the lawn. Those are passive recreation places that have been designed and made. And then of course we have the active spaces, over in the East Mesa, for example, all the active recreation as well. So I'm not.
I think the distinct difference is that we're looking at placemaking as a comprehensive understanding of how we use space in Balboa Park, and even the linkages. So even trail maintenance and adding trails and linkages from an open space to a more hardscaped location contributes to placemaking in the park, because you're allowing folks to link from a place that may be more busy with people and have opportunities for food and beverage and a cultural experience, and you're providing that link and kind of teasing folks to that trail that goes down the canyon, and you can wander it through to the new Kate O Sessions garden.
Yeah, so we were actually talking about the activation of the South Palisades, but then we were talking about opportunities in Golden Hill. And for me, I'm always looking at what needs to be done, which is a curse and a blessing sometimes. But that trail along 26th Street, John Anderson put it in my brain multiple years ago. We got to do something. And so that, it's just one of those conversations you have in passing, and then the opportunity presents itself. And, in July, we'll have the California Conservation Corps is going to be completely rehabilitating that link from Golden Hill into the open space of Florida Canyon, which also links back up to the Central Mesa, right? So we have these deliberate links in being able to link the places that we have made that people can enjoy for respite or for active recreation, you know, through the trails.
And I think that also speaks to, Christopher had asked a follow-up question about signage and wayfinding and providing resources for folks to like find those places. And Jackie, again, I might ask you to chime in on signage and wayfinding and how we're evolving that for the park.
Yeah, as some of you know, we've been doing a comprehensive park-wide signage and wayfinding program for more than 3 years now. I think it started actually even before my time with the Conservancy, with the inventory of the signage throughout the park and leading people into the park as well. And we're actually in the fabrication stage of implementing our phase 1 of our signage and wayfinding. And so it's incredibly exciting. There's a tremendous need, and you know, we're starting with the most basic, you know, visitor amenities. How do you get into the park? How do you know when you're in the park? You're welcome to Balboa Park kind of signs, you know, things that seem like no-brainers, but with all the different needs that we have in the park, sometimes those basic things get neglected. You know, where are your restrooms? How far is it to the restrooms? What's a 5-minute walk? What's a 10-minute walk? Those are things that will be addressed in the phase 1 implementation that's coming up this summer and fall.
Yeah, some of that, you know, you've got signage and wayfinding, and I think that we just went through an exercise with the Downtown Partnership for San Diego about that had to do not just with placemaking, but you talk about place branding and what is different in Golden Hill and what kind of experience do you want to feel in Golden Hill versus what you might want to feel in the South Palisades. And they have kind of a different historic quality to them and a different experience you want to feel. So it might have a different brand to it when you really develop a full placemaking program for that area. It has a unique personality. So I think moving forward, those will be taken into account as we develop and roll out a park-wide placemaking plan, which we do plan to do with recommendations from Project for Public Spaces, which is work we did through a visioning workshop with park stakeholders and some community conversations and some creative data gathering.
And going back to the expectation piece, you know, certainly a brand sets an expectation right out of the gate, right? It gives you a feeling about a particular place, and that is your like first touch point on what to expect when you go there.
Absolutely. And I think there's a final, just to follow up on how do you create spaces that aren't fully programmed, but that you invite that passive placemaking. One of the best examples that we've been bringing up a lot in the Palisades is an example of having like a stage that's either temporary that comes out, like certain things that allow for people to program the space themselves, impromptu performances from your favorite 6-year-old, whatever it is, that those are not going to be an advertisement that gathers hundreds of people to a location, but that the space is spontaneously activated by individuals, by the community, by the visitors. That's a good example of that. Yes, there's so much more to talk about on placemaking, and I think that we'll have another chance to revisit this once we roll out that report from Project for Public Spaces. Any last words from David, Mike, Jackie?
I just want to say thank you. This was a pleasure to be here with you. And, you know, again, I hope I have a chance to come back and visit in person here soon. So if you're ever in, good. Okay, good. If you're ever in Detroit too, you know, Sarah, maybe you can give out my email, or, you know, I'd love to show you what we're working on. Or even if you just have follow-up questions, happy to help and give insight. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, David.
Yeah, I would also echo, you know, thanks for pulling this together, and also to you, I'm really excited for what's coming down the road, right? I feel like that there's a higher level of collaboration and discussion than has happened in the past around this, and there are certainly a lot of people who can move things to action that are involved. And so that excites me a lot. And also too, from the venue perspective and the museums and so forth, you know, again, I said it at the beginning, the more that we can have designed experiences and places in between, as well as engage the institutions to come out into the outdoor spaces, like the more visitors benefit. And that's really what I'm about. It's like focusing on that visitor. So I'm super excited. And also if we can do more of these to just keep people updated on what's happening, I think that'd be great.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's great working with you. Jackie?
So much for coordinating this, Sarah, and it's awesome to hear what's happening in Detroit, David. I look forward to visiting soon in the summertime, hopefully.
Come in the winter too. We can go ice skating.
I grew up in Massachusetts. I'm okay with it.
Oh, okay, you're good.
That's why I live here in San Diego.
Oh,
Anyway, but no, thank you. It's really nice to see the different perspectives. So brilliant, Sarah, to get everyone with different perspectives on this, you know, for programming and design and tourist issues. There's so much to consider. So thank you.
yeah. Well, I love chatting with you all, and I'm really excited to get back and have an opportunity to visit more parks. Certainly, if you haven't been to Campus Martius in Detroit, really fantastic experience. I mean, I'll admit I did not go in the winter, but I encourage everyone to make that a top visit and say hello to David while you're there. Thank you again, all of you, really grateful. Thank you to all of the Conservancy donors and leadership. We are definitely embarking on an exciting venture, and can't wait to share it all with the rest of you. Have a great night.